And this one's important because I've been on the phone on the other side of numerous phone calls from moms, from dads, from spouses, from siblings, from children, that we just don't understand addictions. We just don't get why he or she keeps repeating the same thing. It's like they got so much potential. They were making so much progress. I just don't get it, Barm. I just don't understand it. And this talk is hopefully going to help you gain a little bit more insight, a little bit more understanding into the addiction process, the experience of addictions, and segue into the recovery process, which we'll talk about next week. So there's a difference between knowledge and understanding, right? So knowledge doesn't necessarily mean you're going to understand something. Okay, they say knowledge is power, and that could be the case. You know, applied knowledge could produce some type of a power or some type of a level of understanding. However, just knowledge alone doesn't do anything for understanding. And what's an easy way to better explain what I'm trying to say to you is this, is if I put up a really complex math question on the board, right? So there's a math question behind me, and it's some type of, you know, algebra, trigonometry, or something, calculus, or something that if that's not what you do in life, the average person like myself, or maybe you watching this, are not going to be able to solve it. It's just impossible. You can't look at something and solve it unless that's what you do. You know, there's probably some smart engineers or math majors watching this and like, actually I could, but we're not talking to you right now. I'm talking to the regular person. So if I put this math question behind me and say, can you solve this? You're going to say, Parham, you know, I haven't done math since high school. I don't know how to do that. And I say, okay, well, if I give you the answer to this math problem, so then I give you the answer to the math problem and put it up there. So now you have the answer to the problem. And if I ask you the question, do you understand it now? You're going to say, no, I don't understand it. So just having the answer to something does not help you understand it. Okay, so now we're talking about addictions, right? I want you to remember this quote, write it down, jot it down, go back and watch this on Facebook. I did upload the relapse video on YouTube, by the way, so I am starting to get a little bit of the uploads going to YouTube. But here it is. If you're trying to understand addictions, I want you to remember this. It is impossible to understand addictions without first finding out what it is the addict gets or hopes to get from the drink, the drug, or the addictive behavior. Okay, so I'm going to say it again. It is impossible to understand addictions without finding out what it is that the addict finds or hopes to find from the drink, the drug, or the addictive behavior. Okay, so this becomes really important because that's where a lot of the understanding is going to happen. Because the definition, so if I say, hey, what is addictions? And you can go, I'm sure every single one of you have done this 1,000 times. What is addictions? You type it into Google and you're going to get a bunch of different things in. Some things are going to come up as brain diseases. Some are going to come up as genetics. Some are going to come as environmental. It's going to come a little bit of both. I'm not going to get into all that right now, right? When you search addictions, one of the accepted definitions that's been around for a long time now, and it's pretty much accepted in the medical model, it's accepted in the behavioral health model, it's accepted in the mental health model, and that's the continued use of a substance or engaging in a destructive behavior despite of negative consequences. So you can keep doing something despite of negative consequences. That could be classified as something's going on with addictions, because why would a human being continue acting out, engaging with, taking something that's destroying their lives, right? So that's kind of the accepted definition right now, watered down version, but good enough for this conversation. So that alone right now, so you say, what is addiction? And the answer is continued use despite of negative consequences. That's the same as, here's the calculus problem, here's the answer, do you understand it now? Because as a mom or a dad or a sibling or a spouse or a loved one or a grandparent watching this, if you just say, well, I don't get it. You know, so I get what it means, but I don't understand why they keep doing it, right? Which is the phone calls that I've gotten, hence inspired me to create this video. Because the question is, it has to be asked is, why does someone keep doing it, right? When they take away the job, they get kicked out of school, they have no money in their bank account, they're losing their children, you know, the courts are coming in, taking their children away from them. When all that stuff's happening, why do they keep doing it, right? So that's the kind of the idea behind this. And I'll tell you this, I'm heavily influenced by a world-renowned doctor. This talk is actually, I've gathered a lot of information from his teachings and his writings, and I've changed it into, Parham's language and modified it through my own personal experience. But if you enjoy the way I deliver information, if you like the way that I speak, I talk, I strongly encourage you to go check out, his name is Dr. Gabor Mate, M-A-T-E. He has multiple books written on addictions, mental health, stress, parenting, and you can just find him on YouTube just talking, and he's eloquent, he speaks well, he is rooted in a lot of real personal experience working in downtown Vancouver with the most sick, at-risk, addicted, traumatized population of human beings. So a lot of this stuff comes from there. So go to the source and kind of get re-exposed to the information the way I learned. But the roots of addiction. So if you're trying to understand something, you have to get to the roots of it. You can't understand something on the surface. Just looking at something as on the surface of the drink or the drug is not enough. You have to go deeper and deeper and deeper to get to the roots of it. Because when you address the roots, the end result can change. Okay? So here's the roots, and bear with me, I'm going to try to explain how the phenomenon of pain, which ultimately leads to addictions, gets created in human beings. Okay, so human beings, we have two needs, all right? I mean, depending on how you want to look at it, for this conversation, we have two needs. The first need we have is the need for attachment. Okay, all human beings, all life forms, all human beings, we have this need for attachment. So when we come out of the womb, if you will, we need to attach to a primary caregiver. It could be mom, could be dad, it could be parents, it could be grandparents, it could be adopted parents, whoever it is that comes out. A human being, a human soul, a human child cannot live without initial attachment. It is impossible. We are the most underdeveloped species that come, when we're born at 9 months, we're actually severely underdeveloped, right? Because when you look at a horse that's born, for example, when it comes out, a few days, a few hours later, it's able to walk and gallop. How long does it take for a human being to be able to hold his neck up, or to be able to start walking, engaging in some behavior, psychomotor, engaging in activities, speaking, all that stuff? We're underdeveloped when we come out. So we need that need for attachment just to live, just to survive. And as we go on in life, that need for attachment continues significantly, right? And the stronger the attachments are, the better that need is fulfilled. So when mom or dad, or whoever you want to call it, but when that attachment exists, it's a strong attachment. There's a safety that gets created in the world of a human being. The next need that we have is the need for authenticity. And what the need for authenticity is the need for me to say what I need to say, to feel what I need to feel, to do what I want to do, right? In a way that makes me feel authentic and whole, okay? So we all know what it's like to be able to be yourself. It feels so good. Have you ever noticed when you're just able to be yourself, it's like, oh, it feels so good. When you want to say something to someone and say what you really, really mean and what you feel, and you say it the right way, it just feels so good to get whole and complete. We all know that feeling. Okay, so we have the need for attachment and we have the need for authenticity. And here's where a lot of problems get created. The need for attachment is greater than the need for authenticity. So the human being, and when we compare these two, the need for attachment has more weight than the need for authenticity. So how does that show up in life is this, is if I tell my parents, so let's say I did something wrong, right? As a child, I did something wrong. I took something that wasn't mine. I said something that I shouldn't have said. I listened to something I shouldn't have listened. If I tell my parents that I stole something from the store, right? What are they going to do? Are they going to get mad at me? Are they going to yell at me? Are they going to scream at me? Am I going to lose my attachment, right? So if I feel that I tell them the truth, am I going to lose my attachment? If the answer is yes in the mind of the human being, we suppress our authenticity. So we suppress the truth because we don't want to lose attachment. This can happen in relationships. If I was unfaithful to my spouse, right? And if I tell my spouse, are they going to leave me? So I'm not going to say anything. This can happen in a work relationship. If I tell my boss that I was, that I lied about the receipts or the accounts, am I going to lose my job? If the answer is yes, I'm going to suppress authenticity. If I tell my parents about my sexuality, am I going to lose their love? Am I going to lose their care? If the answer is yes, I'm going to suppress my authenticity. If I tell the teachers what I really feel about the subject and they're going to give me an F, I'm going to suppress my authenticity. And what happens is we try to hold on to anything and everything that we have at the cost of authenticity, of our true self, okay? And for some kids, and it happens a lot in treatment world, there's a lot of broken homes, there's a lot of divorces, there's a lot of single attachments, single mom, single dad, just grandparents. It becomes even more. So if there's, for example, let's say the mother and the father are divorced, and the child is being raised by a hardworking single mom that it's all the kid has, and the dad's not really in the picture, the kid suppresses authenticity even more because, first of all, he doesn't want to lose that connection by any stretch of the imagination, because if he loses that one, then it's got nothing. Plus, kids, and I've heard this from their mouths, is they don't want to add any more stress to the mom already because they feel like that would break it. So they start to suppress. So as I'm saying this, you can start quickly realize that even if you're not in if you don't have addictions yourself, you can see how in your own personal life there's been times that you've suppressed authenticity because of attachment, not wanting to lose attachment, right? So when we do that, what happens is if I continue to suppress my true self, suppress my authenticity, it leads to disconnection from self. And that's why a lot of people say, I don't even know who I am. You know, there's a lot of your loved ones, by the way, in the program that say they don't have a true identity. Wherever they go, they can just blend in and just kind of play the part and talk the walk and walk the walk and just dress a certain way and act a certain way. They got no values, they got no this, they got no that, because over time they just disconnected. And that disconnection, the same way you know it, it's the same disconnection. When you know you're not connected to yourself, there's a pain. It just doesn't feel right. There's a pain that gets created. It's an emotional pain. It's a discomfort that gets created. And suppression of authenticity leads to disconnection and leads to pain, okay? And I want you to listen to this part, because we talk about why do they drink, why do they use? Well, let's take a look at what it is that they use, you know, with substances, what it is that they use with drugs, and also addictive behavior, and see if there's any correlation with pain, okay? So some of your loved ones, I know alcohol was one of my main drugs of choices. I mean, alcohol was the most constant drug of choice, let's call it that, because I didn't have all the money all the time to be able to, you know, to do drugs. I didn't have a street hustle game to be able to go do a lot of stuff. But alcohol was cheap. You get the squishy little vodka bottles. You could drink as much of it as you wanted. You throw up, you can repeat, all that kind of stuff. And, you know, it's easily accessible. It's not illegal, all that kind of stuff. Alcohol, prior to the advancements of medical, you know, the medical advancements that we have today, when they wanted to do, like, you know, someone was injured in war, for example, alcohol was used as a local anesthetic, right? Anesthetic is actually a painkiller. So alcohol could be used for killing pain. And some of you, by the way, you know, they got the blues, you know, you sit at the bar and you just drink your sorrows away, right? People are feeling they just got broken up with and they just drink it away, and they drink. Alcohol is a painkiller, okay? It's a painkiller. It's legal and it's easily accessible and it's socially accepted, but it's a painkiller. And then you look at, for example, cocaine. Cocaine is a drug that's commonly used and abused. It could be snorted, it could be smoked in crack form, it could be injected. Anytime there's a word in the English language that has the ending of like A-I-N-E, so you look at like lidocaine, novocaine, you look at cocaine, it's actually a painkiller of the nerve endings. So again, you go back to the early 1900s, 1910, 1920, you can go to a pharmacy and there was actually cocaine in a lot of medication, over-the-counter medication, that was used for pain killing, right? For teeth, gums, stuff like that. If any of you have ever tried cocaine, you would know that you rub a little bit on your gums and it completely goes numb. And cocaine is a painkiller, okay? And I'll tell you where I'm getting to all this. You look at marijuana, so a lot of your loved ones, you know, they've been smoking at a young age. It's usually called the gateway. I think, you know, it's a combination of lifestyle stuff that's the gateway. It's not just a drug. But marijuana is something that's highly used, highly abused, a lot of dependency on it in the country. It's taken the form of alcohol, which is going down the legalization side of things. But marijuana, THC, one of the effects that it has is it's a painkiller. And if you don't know that, there's a lot of medicine that instead of putting people that are going through chronic pain with physical pain or even like end stage, like cancer treatment, instead of prescribing them pills that are highly addictive, they prescribe them or recommend them to use marijuana for pain killing, right? There's people actually use it for that. So marijuana is also a painkiller. And you look at opiates, which, you don't have to be a rocket scientist here. We've all been prescribed them, whether you have a root canal or you hurt your back or it's like the top 3 most prescribed medications in the United States, Vicodin. I think blood pressure, cholesterol medication is up there, and I think it's Vicodin after that. I believe that 80% of all of the Vicodin prescribed in the world is prescribed in the United States. And it's not that we're just that much more in pain. We just use it for physical pain. And what happens is, so heroin, fentanyl, that whole realm are also the same, they're all opiates, synthetic opiates, and they're all also painkillers. Okay, so you go through all these drugs of abuse that we're talking about. You go through alcohol, you go through marijuana, you go through cocaine, you go through opiates, heroin. They're all painkillers. And so far you realize that these are the same medications, these are the same drugs that your loved ones are using, right? And also destructive behaviors, which we'll talk about a little bit: overeating, shopping, gambling, all of them are also painkillers, okay? Actually, let's just talk about it since we're here. So people that, they go through a breakup or something like that, they just want to go eat a pint of ice cream, right? If you're really just feeling stressed out, anxious, that kind of stuff like that, you go and you overindulge with food, and you eat and eat and eat and eat, and all of it goes in your stomach, and all of the blood in your body has to rush out of your brain and go to your stomach to digest, and you go into a food coma, right? The food coma that you're not even thinking, you're in a fog, you're just laying there, and sometimes you even fall asleep. You take a nap after you have a big meal, right? I know this might sound offensive to some people, but physiologically, when someone nods out from eating too much food and someone nods out from taking opiates, there's not that much difference. One is an illicit drug that, shame on that person. The other one is a legal drug that they got from the drive-thru, which is, hey, it's okay. The legal drug that people get from the drive-thru also has impact on the cardiovascular system. Also, it leads to diabetes, also kills people at a much higher rate than the drug does, by the way. But this one's okay, because if you go in a food coma, it's just what happens after you eat a lot of food. But you look at shopping, right? Retail therapy, people just swipe and swipe and swipe when they're stressed out, and they feel euphoric and high, walking around with a bunch of bags in their hand. They come home and they're just full of guilt and full of shame and full of stress because they just did it to the credit card one more time, right? Gambling, and we can keep going on and on with all those stuff. So I'm just trying to highlight that the drugs and addictive behaviors, right? Sometimes they correlate. Actually, almost always they correlate. And it's always an escape of stress, escape of pain. And the power about what I'm trying to say to you is this: the human brain cannot distinguish between real or perceived pain. So we know when someone's arm's broken and you get prescribed painkillers for that broken wrist, we understand that there's physical pain, it's helped soothe the pain. We all get that. But what people don't understand and people don't know, and it's not common knowledge, is when someone says that they're heartbroken, when someone got traumatized, when someone got abused, when someone got not validated, when someone got ridiculed, someone got bullied, right? And they emotionally break. The brain lights up the same way as if they have a broken limb, as if something in them is broken. The brain's lighting up. There's brain scans that you can go in and look at someone that's experienced some type of a serious loss, a pain in their life, and someone that's under the influence of drugs. Their brains are lighting up the same way. So all that being said is, if you're trying to understand addictions, it's not going to be found in any type of definition. So it's not why the addictions, but why the pain, right? The source of the pain in human beings. That's where the root of this addiction is. That's where it exists. People don't use painkillers if they're not in pain, right? You might not see it because nothing's broken, but something internally, emotionally. I mean, I did a whole talk on trauma, by the way. I strongly encourage you to go watch it on our Facebook. There is a very, very, very high correlation with trauma and addictions, right? And sometimes some parents might say, well, nothing ever happened to my kid, That, first of all, could be your interpretation. That could be your truth. It might not be theirs. And trauma isn't always about things that happen to a kid that shouldn't have happened. Sometimes trauma could be about things that should have happened that didn't happen. That is also a traumatic experience, right? And that's for another talk. But so addiction, my friends, is not the problem. I get it, man. Drugs and alcohol, it's scary. It is life or death. It puts legal standing in jeopardy. It rips up families. I get it. I've been there. My family's watching this right now, and they've been there. So it's a personal thing for me. I'm not minimizing it by any stretch of the imagination. But addiction is not the problem. Drugs and alcohol are not the problem. For the person who's experiencing addictions, the addict or the alcoholic, addiction is often their attempt to solve a problem, right? They're trying to solve a problem in them. And what are those problems? So as a marriage and family therapist, as a licensed advanced alcohol and drug counselor, some of the things that I've heard clients say to me over the years, right? I've had a client tell me, Param, it's helped me escape my reality. So when you ask them, hey, what do you get out of drugs and alcohol? Right? Because remember, you can't understand addictions without finding out what it is the addict finds or hopes to find from the drink, the drug, or the addictive behavior. So instead of asking them what's wrong with addictions, a good question to ask, and that's what Dr. Gabor Mate kind of teaches, is to ask them what's right with addictions. What's right with addictions for you? And here's some of the answers. He says, it helped me escape my reality, right? She says, it helps me walk across the room, look at people in the eyes, and feel like I belong in the room, right? It helps me quiet my mind at night so I can fall asleep, right? So when you ask a person why they keep using despite of negative consequences, those are the answers. They're trying to escape some type of a reality. Their self-esteem is so low that they can't even walk across the room and feel part of it. They're even deserving of being in that room. Their mind is racing so much that they can't even sleep at night, right? So those are the reasons why this person continues to use. So when you get to, if you're trying to get to the roots of addiction, which I know you are, is the question that clinicians, counselors, therapists, the individual that's going through it, families ask is, what was going on in this person's reality that they needed to use a substance? What kind of pain were they in that they needed to use a substance to escape from it, to numb it out? Like, what was wrong with their reality that they needed a different version of reality? That's where the root of addiction is. It's not about the drugs and alcohol they're using right now. It's about that. Without getting to the bottom of that, guess what's going to happen? Another reality will get created that they're not going to be okay with. And because they've used that methodology to escape the pain, they're going to use it again. Until they learn how to live within chaos, an environment that's not stable, process the environment that was unstable in the past, and move forward and recreate ones that aren't like that anymore in their own lives, to transform their life experience. When a person says, I couldn't walk across the room to shake someone's hand and look them in the eye, I didn't feel like a part of, to go back and find out what happened to them, that their self-esteem got destroyed, that their self-worth got destroyed, that they feel like they can't even be in a room with people. Because once they get to the bottom of that and process that, they can be in rooms without needing it. I mean, I'm standing here talking in front of you really well, really knowledgeable with some command of, the concepts that I'm talking about, this and that. You go back in 12 years of my life and I didn't have any of this information. I always felt that I had a lot of information in my head, but I couldn't translate it into words a lot of times because of my history of moving back and forth through the country and to Iran and the United States and Iran and the United States. I remember vividly being in high school in the United States, junior year, after I just came here from Iran. And sometimes I even had the answers. I knew I could raise my hand and tell the teacher that I have the answer, but I never would. I wouldn't stand in front of the class and say anything because I was afraid of looking stupid. I was afraid of saying the wrong thing. I was afraid of not being right. And I would just quiet down. And then I remember when I would drink or I would smoke or my confidence would come through the roof. See, because I was missing it. And when substances came and gave it to me, I ran with it. Until later on, I found out when I worked on myself, without the substance, okay, why is my self-esteem so low? Why is my confidence so low? Is that rooted in the now, or is it from a 16-year-old version of me that was insecure, shy, afraid? And when I started combating those, and that's what I worked on this morning, by the way, with your loved ones in morning group, right before this, is to combat those limiting beliefs that we have, to create new standards for ourselves. And same thing goes with family. So, and the other one was, yeah, it helped me quiet my mind when I would sleep at night, to go back and find out, why is this person's world so loud that they need a substance to quiet it, right? When did that happen to them? Was it mom and dad fighting when they were young? Did they start coming up with conclusions and interpretations of what's happening? And as soon as they start smoking some weed, it's like, I don't care if they fight, right? And because they continue using that every time the world gets loud, right? And so it's a very important thing to get to the roots of all this. So we can hopefully agree that the root of addiction and the root of addictive behaviors and all that stuff is some type of a pain, or else we wouldn't use painkillers. If you can agree with that, and you might not be able to, you might just say, you know what, I don't believe in all this stuff, Parm, and that's okay. You know, I've talked to enough human beings in clinical settings and therapeutic settings that I can confidently tell you that the root of addictions comes from pain. Confidently tell you that. And what's painful to another human being might not be painful to you, right? I always say, what's painful to one of your children might not be painful to the other one. You know, if you grab two identical plates from the same distance and drop them on the ground, they're going to have completely different break patterns. You can have two children that experience the same exact fall, and they're going to break in different ways. So the ones that come to me in our setting are usually ones that are experiencing some type of pain because of that, and the other one might not, right? So it's not apples to apples. So the cure for the pain is in the pain. You know, addiction is all about avoidance. Avoidance of self, avoidance of the problem, avoidance of life. The cure for the pain is in the pain. And the avoidance of pain produces more pain. So that's what you need to do watching this video, is to go to your sources of pain and get into them with the help of professionals, counselors, therapists, life coaches, support groups, you know, whatever it is, to get some support around you and to be able to go to the roots of these pains and see what you can actually get to the bottom of. Okay, get to the bottom of, because it'll show up in your life in different ways. If it doesn't show up in your life with drugs and alcohol, I promise you it will show up in a way, right? Usually in relationships, using your self-worth, the thoughts you have about yourself, usually sometimes in bank accounts, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, so now we got to the root of the pain, right? So when you're talking about human pain, I got a few messages from people saying thanks a lot, and this is good material. Thank you for watching, because there's no point for me standing here in my living room, like I always say, sharing this stuff on a Saturday if there's no one to be listening to it. So thank you for watching it. I mean, you're the reason why we do this. So when we're talking about pain, you have to talk about compassion. Okay, there is no such thing as talking about pain without compassion, because it just creates more pain. So you got to talk about compassion. I know that's one thing that it's hard to do when you get frustrated as a parent, you get annoyed, agitated, you get your hopes up, and something happens and you just say, why again? You know, we lose the compassionate mind very quickly. But the cure for the pain is in the pain. And remember this, that it is only when compassion is present do people allow themselves to see the truth. Okay? It is only when compassion is present do people allow themselves to see the truth. And what truth is that? Right? So that's a big statement, right? That people allow themselves to see the truth. What truth is that? And here's the truth. You ready? That nobody, no man, no woman, no boy, no girl, no human being wants to be a drug addict or an alcoholic. Nobody wants it. Okay? And that might be contrary to what you've heard from a loved one or someone struggling with addictions. They say, well, this is what I want to do, and I love my drugs, or I'm going to keep drinking, I'm going to keep using, there's nothing you can say to me, this is the lifestyle I want. That might be contrary to that, right? But again, that's the surface stuff. Underneath it all, nobody wants to be a drug addict, alcoholic. How do I know that? Oh man. So when you're going through your marriage and family therapy degree, they make you do something called a practicum internship. And what I did was I went to this place called Alternative Options. Wonderful place, wonderful facility. They're in Orange County, California, mental health, substance abuse. And they had me working with adolescents, and they had me working with young adult populations, you know, as young as 12, with a therapist. You know, the main therapist was there, and I was kind of the intern, and we're in a group. And one thing that I did, and I had to be there for a total of, it was like a year-long commitment. So one thing that I did for my class was I wanted to ask every human being that I worked with, all these children that I worked with, is what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be and what do you want to do when you grow up? Okay, and I jotted down all the answers. After 1 year of gathering data, and there's a couple hundred kids at this point, maybe like 400 or 500 kids in a year span. The information I got helped me realize the truth of this quote. And not one of those children said, when I grow up, I want to be a drug addict. Not one of those children said, when I grow up, I want to be an alcoholic. Not one of them. There was one that said, I want to be a gang member, but yeah, you look at his family history and father or brothers or uncles, they're all in gangs, so he doesn't know the difference. But not one of them said they want to be a drug addict or alcoholic. So now you look at human beings that are experiencing addictions right now, people that are on the streets, people that are in treatment centers, people that are out there not in the streets or in treatment centers, but they're still out there using. They're only a few years removed from those children. The 22, 23, 24, 30-year-old human being is that same child that said, when I grow up, I don't want to be a drug addict, right? And that truth still exists inside them. And when you use compassion to get to that truth, all people will tell you, this is not the way I want to live my life. I'm telling you, even if they tell you, even if you think they love their drugs, they don't love their drugs. They love what their drugs temporarily gives them. They love the pain relief they achieve from it, right? The truth of it is everybody wants to be healthy. They want to be connected to other human beings. That's all we want. We just want connection. So the drug addict and the alcoholic, my friend, they're not different than many others in society. We already talked about food, right? Right now there's research that says about 2/3 of the United States population is overweight. About 30% is clinically obese. So a third of our population is obese, 2/3 is overweight. And that comes directly from lifestyle. It comes from eating too many calories and not moving, right? Directly. I mean, there's no other, you can't argue this one with Parham. So food is a drug. Food changes the way that we think. The food coma I was talking about is real. We're not intended to go get our food through driving around a building and getting it from a window. We're supposed to find our food and make our food and use healthy food and eat it around people over a period of time. We're supposed to enjoy it. We're supposed to be grateful for it. Whatever dietary preferences you have. I have my own. I'm not going to get there with you right now. Food also causes things like cardiovascular disease. Here's a statistic for you. 600,000 people a year die from cardiovascular disease in the United States. Do the math and see how many people per day that is. Do the hourly math and see how many people died while we were having this conversation because of dietary choices they're having in their lives, right? It's a drug. They continue to use it despite of negative consequences. How many people do you know in your life that have had bypasses, heart attacks, and they're still eating the same food that the doctor's telling them not to eat? What's different between that and the person that's smoking their drugs when the clinician tells them to stop smoking it, right? Because the person that's using food is also using it to soothe some type of pain, usually stress. Too stressed out and eating kind of helps. Stress eating, they call it stress eating. That's a form of addiction. Consumer debt, all-time high. The average American right now has about 10 credit cards, combination of credit cards, store cards, this and that. Retail therapy, all that kind of stuff. Online, Amazon's boom of, this past quarter was just sickening of how much money was spent on stuff that a few years down the line, people just throw away anyways, But the truth of the matter is online consumer debt is at an all-time high. So what's the difference, my friends, between someone laying in their bed staring at their ceiling, can't sleep at night because they can't pay the mortgage, they can't pay the kids' medical bills, and they're so far behind in debt that they can't sleep, and the person that's engaging in substances is staying up at night because they can't sleep because they did too much drugs. They're both experiencing the same world. They both have the same stress. It's both dark, dim, depressed, right? It's just they're getting their dopamine from a different source. Spending makes people high, man. I'm telling you, if you ever watch people walking around malls and stuff like that with bags in their hands, they look like they're on drugs until they come home and they realize, oh my gosh, I did it again. Love, relationships, that kind of stuff. You know, people that go into multiple relationships over and over again to get that initial dopamine high. You know, that people love the feeling of falling in love, but don't like the work it takes to remain, to maintain that feeling. Work is a big time addiction. People work to get away from their life, get away from their problems, work 16, 18, 20 hours a day, all at the name of, you know, they're doing it for the family or they're doing it for love. Some of that might be true, by the way. This is all, I'm speaking in generalities, please don't get offended. But people that spend all their time working because they're doing it for the family, but on the flip side, there's a child there saying, all I want is my dad or my mom, right? So remember, trauma is not always things that happen that shouldn't have happened. It's also things that, it's not always things that shouldn't have happened that did happen. It's also things that should have happened that didn't happen. That parents should be there for their loved one and wasn't there for their loved one. That neglect is a form of trauma. Now, it could be masqueraded under love, but it's still a form of trauma for the child that's 7 or 8 years old wanting dad to be home, right? So I know this is complex stuff, but addictions is complex. Hopefully I'm trying to deliver it in a simple way. So suggested keys, I think this is the last major slide I have here. So if you're trying to understand addictions, that's why you're watching this, right? It's not just to go look on what Google says or Wikipedia says about addictions, because you won't need me for that, and it won't help. Yeah, it won't really get you to where you're trying to get to. But my suggested keys for addiction is to be able to always come from a place of compassion. So it's compassionate inquiry. It's coming from a place of compassion, that when you see a human being acting out or using substances to kill pain, first of all, it's like, what are they actually going through that they need that? Because right now, there is not a drink or a drug that I would need to take away any type of emotional pain, physical pain that I have, because I don't have it, right? So when I do get stressed out and pain does show up, I've learned through the recovery process what type of healthy coping skills are there, what type of healthy painkillers are there, what type of positive coping skills are there to be able to reduce the pain. And believe it or not, there's wonderful ways. Who would have thought breathing exercises can take away your pain better than drugs, better than food, better than spending, better than all that stuff? You know, but people just don't want to learn those things because they don't think it gives the immediate results it does. But after time, it actually does. Walking around the block 30 minutes a day, believe it or not, it does wonders. It helps you manage your weight. Who would have thought? It helps you change the way you think. Who would have thought? But if things are easy to do, they're also easy not to do. And that's the problem with human behavior. So you want to be able to always come from a place of compassion. So whether it's yourself or others, to kind of not get angry, upset, frustrated because the person that you're seeing is actually experiencing a lot of pain. The next one is to be able to identify the similarities rather than the differences. So it's easy to say, I'm different than that person because they're using heroin and I'm not, right? That's very easy to do. But what am I? You turn you flip the mirror around and look at yourself. What do I do to numb my own pain? We're all addicted to something that takes away the pain. All of us. Hopefully there's some good ones. But what do I do that helps me numb my pain? What do I do that helps me soothe, self-soothe, cope, right? And you want to be able to see that. Now, am I condoning the heroin use versus, am I saying which one's better or worse? No, it's not a comparison thing, my friends. It's just to say that we also use certain things to be able to numb our pain, right? The funniest one is the parents that smoke cigarettes and then they get angry at their kid for using substances. I mean, I whenever I have the opportunity to work with those people, I just tell them, what do you expect? And they're like, well, they know better. It's like, I've taught them different. I've told them different. Well, you didn't show them different. People don't learn by the things that you tell them. They learn by what they see. So if they see you drink to take away your stress and they see you smoke to take away your stress, guess what they're going to do? They're going to drink and smoke to take away their stress. So I've had so many parents get upset with me when I've talked about the food stuff, or I've talked about the cigarette stuff, or I've talked about the shopping stuff. And like, how are you comparing me eating fast food every day to my kid, using drugs all the time? I'm like, I am. Sorry, man, I am. And I can stand by that because there's facts and statistics about, type 2 diabetes that kills people way more than addiction does. Cardiovascular disease kills people way more than addiction does. People just don't want to look at those things. So you want to look at the similarities rather than the differences. And then you also want to be able to understand addiction. You want to acknowledge your shortcomings with the person who's addicted. So instead of it always being their fault or something they've done wrong, you also want to look and say, hey, this is something that I've done, something that I'm working on. This is where I've fallen short. And let them know that you also see yourself as a human being at the same level as them. You're not up here because you don't do drugs and they're down here because they do drugs. You're both right here because you're both human beings. We're both having the same human experience. Our signs, symptoms, all that kind of stuff is just manifesting in different ways. We're all the same. You know, at the root of everybody just wants to feel loved. Everybody just wants to feel connected. Everybody just wants to be acknowledged. Everybody wants to be heard. And everybody wants to have a purpose in life. That's it. And compassion helps us get to that root of human beings. And the last one is for yourself as a family member to commit to continuous self-improvement. So the same way you're watching this video, you know, some of you have been really faithful to this. You've been watching every week. And you're committing to continuous self-improvement, to continuously learn about yourself, to learn about others, to learn about life, because that becomes attractive. If you're trying to understand addictions, be the example that you want to see in others. Don't wait for your 22-year-old heroin addicted kid to come transform your life. Transform your life, and maybe the 22-year-old heroin addicted kid is going to get inspired to transform his or hers. Be the change you want to see in others. Be the change you want to see in the world, and see how that happens. And here's the thing. Even if they don't transform, there's a possibility. Guess what? Your life still transforms. You still become a better version of yourself than you were yesterday, last week, last month, last year. You do that over time, and in 5 years, you're going to look back at this current version of yourself and say, oh my gosh, I was so lost back then. Even if you think you have everything figured out right now, right? Continuously work on yourself, and one day you'll look back at your figured out version of yourself and say, I didn't know anything. And that's the beauty of life. That can never end. So hopefully my hope today was that this talk helped you gain a deeper understanding of the addiction process and addictions in general. And next week we're going to talk about the recovery process, and that way we have all 10 or 11 videos all put together in one place on our Facebook. And then after that, you know, I'll let you guys know, but we're going to start the questions and answers and really turn this into something special that's not happening anywhere else besides right here with us at Buckeye Recovery Network and with you lovely people watching. So